Well, the most important task of this 2025 offseason is figuring out and reloading the Ohio State defense, a defense that was the best in the country in 2024 and led the Buckeyes to the national championship. New defensive coordinator Matt Patricia has his hands full as he's got to put the pieces together to restructure, rebuild, and reload this Ohio State defense. We set the new depth chart here tonight on the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast. Anthony Moeglin alongside my partner here and former Buckeye, Kevin Woidke, as we're making our way through the college football offseason. And tonight, is probably one of our biggest shows because we have to reload and reset the Ohio State Buckeye defense. And Kevin, this is our first opportunity to discuss a massive hire that took place last week when the Ohio State Buckeyes named Matt Patricia the new defensive coordinator, replacing Jim Knowles after the Buckeyes had lost Knowles to Penn State. And in that, they lost the coordinator that produced the best defense in college football. So we're kicking off this show, starting it up by asking you, what is your initial thoughts on Matt Patricia being hired as the defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes?
I'm excited. I mean, he was obviously a very, very good defensive coordinator in the NFL. Somehow became an offensive coordinator at some point too. But people remember his stint with the Lions. I mean, yeah, it wasn't the best, but thinking back on those Patriot teams that he was able to call, watching some stuff where even this offseason, I didn't even know we were hiring him, but he's been appearing on podcasts. It's been really cool to hear how his mind works. And I think it was Julian Edelman's podcast for the listen, if you haven't listened to it yet, just to kind of get a mindset of who he is, kind of how he is. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is when listening to that, he talks about how many different plays he has in his defense. I don't know if that's going to be similar to Denzel Burke went on a podcast this week and talked about how that Oregon game, they had like 120 different plays that they had to remember. And it was just tough to stay on top of it. But so I'm hoping that doesn't – I think he will adjust down because you can do that at the NFL level. That's their job. Here they also have schoolwork to have. They can't dedicate their whole time and day to it. So that's where I think that I think it's a great hire. I mean, to boil it down to that.
It's an interesting hire for sure. I think that, I haven't changed my tune from when we talked about it last week here on the show. And if you want to go back and watch kind of what I had to say about that, it's on our YouTube channel. So dig back through it. Had some interesting thoughts and interesting takeaways on it. My only concern really, with the Patricia hire is his lack of college experience. I voiced that earlier last week. I'm going to voice it again. The last time he coached in college was in 2003. His first two stints in college, the first one, he was a GA his first year out of school in 1999 at Amherst College, and then got the opportunity to coach for 2 years at Syracuse, and then he started his stint with New England. So went from obviously Syracuse in 2003, and then from 2004 until 2017, he was somewhere on the defensive side of the football for the New England Patriots. Then he goes to that 3-year stint as the head coach for the Detroit Lions. Doesn't go all that great. Gets his opportunity to get kind of back on his feet in 2021 with New England as a defensive assistant. Then he flipped over to the other side of the ball in 2022 as an offensive line assistant for the Patriots. Got his last stop in 2023 with the New England Patriots, and then was kind of off for the last year. And one of the things I think actually is really interesting. It's not a good or a bad thing, but when you see him, if you haven't seen a picture of him or a video of him in a long while, he looks a lot different. Slimmed all the way down, doesn't even look like his old self. Looks like lost like 100 pounds, which is crazy. But that's regardless of if you can call plays or not. It'll be really interesting in my perspective of how, not a huge deal, but how he can recruit, obviously is a big one, but also how he can change his philosophy and not dumb it down, but simplify it to make sure that everybody on a college roster can understand it. Because to your point, not only do these kids have school and other things to do, they're also different, right? You're now teaching 17 to 20, I don't even know anymore. There was a guy who played basketball on Sunday who was a year younger than me. He's playing for Creighton, which is insane. But regardless, that's besides the point. You're teaching 17 to 24-year-olds, I guess, and it's a little bit different. So it'll be interesting to see how he steers the ship and how he goes about it. But the biggest thing that he's going to have to do, and it's going to start right away, is replacing a lot of impact players on the defensive side of the football, but leaders of this football team. There's going to be a statue one day of Jack Sawyer somewhere on Ohio State's campus for what he means to the Ohio State program, what he meant to the national championship run. But he's not there anymore. Neither is JT Tuimoloau. Neither is Tyleik Williams. Neither is Ty Hamilton. Neither is Cody Simon. Neither is Jordan Hancock. Neither is Lathan Ransom. Neither is Denzel. I can go down the list. There's a lot of guys that they're going to have to replace, and it's going to be a big. It's going to determine the trajectory of the year, how the guys behind those guys have developed and how they can, make an impact on the season.
No, I agree. It'll be an interesting reload. That's for sure. Speaking just to the defensive line, you see a lot of rotation there. I mean, you're going to see some names that look familiar in the back half, but especially up front. You saw him on special teams a lot. You saw him on rotating in the defensive line, Caden Curry, and then same thing with Edric Houston. They both played a good amount towards the end of the year, both rotating in and playing a lot. People remember Houston from the Tennessee game when he got the unsportsmanlike conduct. It's a tough task. The other thing that you're losing is a lot of leadership. A lot of guys that played a lot of ball that have seen a lot of ball and know what's going on.
Yeah. And I'd say up front, the one good thing about some of the guys you're replacing, right? If you look at just the defensive end position, we're going to start with Caden Curry. You mentioned him already, but he's the type of guy who, in my opinion, bleeds scarlet and gray, right? This is a guy who you saw him. He had a couple blocked kicks last year. I mean, as a defensive end, blocking punts, he was the guy, the raw guy, make a play and get everybody excited. Yes, this is exactly what we needed. Had it put together a decent year, not get with limited snaps, 15 tackles on the year, 2.5 sacks. So he's going to be a guy who you lean on, right? For that. Hey, Caden, it's time to step up into that leadership role. On the other side, Kenyatta Jackson. Now, this is a player that really intrigued me because he absolutely looks the part. And up until this season, he's looked like a young player, right? Where it's he hasn't almost filled into his body yet. He's so big and he's so long. When you see him, his arms are so long, and he's got all of the tools, with his build to be one of the next great pass rushers. You just got to see it kind of come to fruition this year when he gets his opportunity. He had 16 tackles last year and 1.5 sacks on the season. So I think starting there is going to be good. Those are going to be your most veteran replacements. The place that really, Kev, is concerning to me is on the interior. You talked about Edric Houston. Remember him not only from that Tennessee game, but he was a huge recruit coming from Georgia that Ohio State was able to flip very late. He's going to be paired up with Caden McDonald, potentially. Again, this is a February depth chart, so a lot's going to change. But Houston and McDonald on the interior combined last season for 11 tackles. That is where it's going to be the biggest concern, because we were blessed, man. We were blessed with Ty and Tyleik inside, really causing a lot of havoc and making it really challenging for opposing offenses.
Right. I mean, this time last year, they thought Caden was going to be the starter. And Ty came into his own. And obviously, we saw what he did last year next to Tyleik. I think Caden's poised to have a big year. I mean, if last year didn't fuel him at all, I don't know what would. But I mean, he's got all the intangibles that he needs. He's going to be a leader. I mean, Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are the same age. They're both, one's a redshirt junior, one's a senior. They're the same class. It's going to be interesting to see because they have some young guys coming in too that are going to have to see the field because the defensive line, there's a lot of rotations. Zion Grady is a true freshman that's coming in. And then Logan George, I don't know much about him, but he transferred in from, I'm not 100% sure where. I could look that up. I mean, you're going to see a lot of these guys. Idaho State.
There we go.
All right, perfect. Welcome, Logan George.
Suppose Columbus is a lot different than from whatever city Idaho State's in.
Yeah, let me do a quick.
As you're looking that up, Kenyatta Jackson, I mentioned it a little bit ago. Kenyatta Jackson stands at 6'6", 258. Right, so this is like if you were to build a pass rusher, you'd build him in this frame where he could put his hand in the dirt and just get in that track stance and blitz around the edge, really pin your ears back. And Caden Curry on the other side, he's got a look to him, right, where he's got that big elbow brace where he stands out, and he's a guy, reminds me of how I felt about junior year Denzel Burke, where it's like the potential to be the emotional leader of this defense, and that's exciting for me. What have you discovered about Idaho State?
It is in Pocatello, Idaho. There we go. That existed until the second. But happy to have him as a Buckeye. He's had some good years. How many sacks last year? 6.5 sacks last year, which is pretty good.
There you go. We welcome him with open arms because we don't have many sacks returning. We have a combined 4 sacks returning on this defensive line. So it's going to be really important, man. And I think that, you do get spoiled's the right word in this sense from a fan perspective, because as that year went on, right, we had huge expectations for JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer last year. And it felt like at the beginning of the season, they weren't really like living up to them. And then you saw their impact as the season wore on. And I think what we didn't really understand and what you will understand is how good Ty and Tyleek were in the interior. I think we're going to learn next year how important those two were and how important those two position groups or those two positions are when you're talking about stopping an offense. Now, Kev, moving one row back, one level of the defense back to the linebacker position. You talk about losing leadership, and you're losing your blocko. You're losing the heart and soul of this defense in Cody Simon. There's not enough good words to say about what Cody Simon meant to not only the defense, but to Ohio State as a whole. And you're losing number 0 in the middle, and it's going to be up to Sonny Styles to hold it down and some of these young guys to come in behind him.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard about Sonny Styles is going to have to be. He wasn't the leader last year. That was evidently Cody Simon. He's got to be that guy. He's coming to his own as a linebacker. He's figured it out. You're going to see Arvell Reese play a good amount. Glenville kid from Cleveland, Ohio. And then the other person that has seemed to be, he's just a freak, CJ Hicks. Those three are going to be dominant. I could see, with Patricia, who knows who's going to be the starters, because that's the other thing is, obviously he liked Knowles liked Arvell and liked Sonny. Mm-hmm. It seemed like CJ kind of took a back seat in that defense. Who knows with the new defense what it's going to entail? We could see more linebackers, less cornerbacks. We could even see a dime package out there a bunch where it's just Sonny out there or Arvell or CJ out there alone, and the rest are DBs. Who knows? That's the beauty of an NFL. You saw Bill O'Brien do it. He moved from Penn State to the NFL to back to Alabama, won national championship in his first year, and then turned BC. And not that BC needed to be turned around, but they had a really good year, upset a few good teams last year. So that's where the difference is, in my opinion, of what Patricia will bring and who we might see from there. And Kate, the Stover prodigy, Garrett Stover. Going to be a sophomore next year. You saw how Cade Stover developed. Maybe he follows in his brother's suit and becomes a tight end as well. I don't know. But, you saw how Cade developed at Ohio State. I assume Garrett is similar, just like how Ty was similar to Devon Hamilton, who I played with. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point to bring up two things that we've talked about in past shows. The first being all of these guys, CJ Hicks included, get a fresh slate, right? All these guys with a new coach on that side of the football get a fresh slate where they're going to be evaluated, right? And where they're going to have an opportunity to prove their new coach, who they are, and which I think is going to be a great opportunity for a lot of those guys. And what I think is going to be also equally important to your point about Matt Patricia is, like, these NFL style defenses are a little bit different, right? Where, it's not going to be, it's always is the best player plays, and that's going to be the case. But sometimes it's going to be, hey, maybe the more athletic linebacker plays, or maybe the guy who's more experienced. We don't know what he values quite yet. So it's going to be a good opportunity, for CJ Hicks. And like you said, you mentioned it last week, development. This is a good opportunity for all these young cats, right? These young dudes who are freshmen becoming sophomores becoming juniors, that maybe aren't on our radars quite yet, to prove a point in spring ball and in workouts right now. Like, hey, it's my time to shine, and I'm going to go take my opportunity and run with it. So that linebacker room, I think, is going to be incredibly. It's going to be a great conversation, but it's also going to be really, really important to get it solved in the right way. All right, the back end of the defense, the secondary, losing some, keeping some. Okay, so you're going to be losing a good handful of guys. Lathan Ransom came on as an emotional and just a general leader of this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Hancock wasn't maybe that vocal guy, but was right in the right spot every single time. Was a great player for the Buckeyes last year. And then Denzel Burke, all three of which head into the NFL draft. Going to have to replace those guys. Starting on the outside, you're going to be looking at Davison Igbinosun, who's going to return. Had a really good year, I would say. Tough to throw against, but also struggle with some penalties at some points in the year. Jermaine Matthews and Lorenzo Styles also got a lot of valuable playing time last year with injuries, with Denzel Burke maybe not playing up to his caliber. So you got some guys here with a little bit of experience playing in that cornerback position.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they replace, obviously, Denzel and Lathan Ransom, who are both. I mean, Lathan was a heavy hitter for his entire time at Ohio State. I mean, you're going to need to find someone who's willing to fill that run gap as well with Caleb Downs, because Caleb's going to be right there. I mean, that's the biggest thing is keeping some, as we get to keep Caleb Downs, and everyone saw him last year. I think a name to watch could be Devin Sanchez. I mean, he's a true freshman. I mean, after Jermaine Matthews, I mean, Davison Igbinosun, obviously, but as well as Jermaine Matthews, I think it's kind of up in the air for that nickel spot. And I think Devin Sanchez is more than capable of competing for that, especially, I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Lorenzo Styles, who played it well last year, but then you also got Miles Lockhart, who's there, redshirt freshman. There's a lot of talent in that cornerback room that I think you're going to see vying for that last open spot. Because I think Jermaine Matthews sewed up opposite Igbinosun. It'll just be interesting to see who fills that final nickel spot or even the dime slot. That'll be a big, big part of this defense, I'm assuming.
Well, and also too, we saw it last year, the importance of depth, right? And I think you'll see it more this year, because it felt like the secondary as a whole was pretty solidified, right? You had a lot of veteran guys in there, a lot of leadership, right? A lot of guys who had been there, done that, been there, and also, failed at times and could respond to that adversity. You're going to have some new faces back there, and you're going to see potentially early on in the season some filtering through of some of those guys. So I think that at the cornerback position specifically, on the edges, I think you feel pretty good with Igbinosun kind of leading the way, and then some kind of a combination of Jermaine, Lorenzo, whomever, Sanchez, who could potentially be a surprise. I think you got to feel pretty confident about what you got on the edges, but you got to feel really confident that number 2 is still going to be on your team. And this is a guy who I'm really excited about, Caleb Downs, because NFL defenses are run a little bit differently, right? If you have a stud player, you have a stud guy like Ohio State has, Patricia's going to find a way to get him closest to the football every single play. We saw that a lot with Jim Knowles last year. I think that you're going to see a lot of that similar stuff where Downs is down near the line of scrimmage, playing where he's comfortable, playing where he can make influences on all the plays. It's going to be really good to have him back. He had a hell of a stat line last year: 48 tackles, 2 interceptions, 6 PBUs, 5 sacks, or excuse me, half a sack. And then that 1 touchdown he had against Indiana on that kick return, which was awesome. But filling in for Lathan Ransom, filling in for Jordan Hancock. You're going to look to Malik Hartford to start. He's going to be a senior next year, but there's a handful of guys behind him that could make their impact here.
No, I mean, you got just in the safety room alone, another true freshman, Fahim Delane, and then a sophomore, Jalen McLean, who played well last year in stints that we saw him out there. It's going to be deep. I think you're going to have Caleb's running that room as tight of a ship as I could imagine. He's a professional, and I think Patricia's going to appreciate that. We're talking about this is going to be our last year with him because we're talking about he's probably going to be a top 5 pick next year. I mean, it's going to be the highest a safety's been taken in an insanely long time. So it'll be interesting to see what they choose, how they choose to utilize him, because he's going to be the focal point. There's going to be offensive linemen keying on where he is.
Yeah, you have to, that's where, you look at that defense last year, and it's, in my opinion, if I'm approaching it from an offensive perspective, I'm like, all right, where's Zero at? Where's Cody Simon at? That's where I'm kind of starting my defense, because it's like, all right, you're incredible up front. You got unbelievable linebackers. You got a secondary that's amazing too. So I'm going to start where 0 is. I'm going to find 2, and then make sure that I know, hey, what kind of posture JT has on my left and Jack has on my right, and then try to figure it out. I think this year it is, if you're an opposing offense, you find where number 2 is, and that is where it's going to dictate a lot of the offense. And that's going to be the cool part. That's going to be the chess match, because one of the things you take away from getting to know these guys and getting to talk to them and getting to be around them is that Caleb Downs is mature beyond his years. Like you said, he's a professional, right? This is a 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who feels like you're talking to a 10-year NFL vet, because he says all the right things. He sits back straight. He looks you right in the eye. He does all the right things. He's the first one in. He's the last one out. He's the type of guy you build not only a defense around, but a team around. And obviously him coming back next year is going to be huge for the Buckeyes and huge for Matt Patricia as he tries to figure out where the rest of these pieces fit, where the rest of these guys go. Now, really important to call out, this is a February, no, what day is it? 19th. This is a February 19th look and guess. This is not this is a prediction. This is a guess of what this defense will look like when that ball is kicked off in August. Kevin, we're going to hit it again. This spring ball, it's develop, right? Find those pieces. Who are those young guys that you touched on that can make an impact? And for everybody else, continue to develop that roster, that depth behind them, because it's going to be all that important. Okay. A fun one we're doing here. We're going to do this all throughout the off season here, especially as we get closer to the start of training camp in August. We're going to take an in-depth look at each team in the Big Ten. But for today, we're getting out of our show here on a little quick Big Ten whip around. I think that this conference, we talked about it on Monday's show, is not only the biggest in terms of numbers in college football, but it's got some of the biggest brands in it, especially with the merging of USC and UCLA. So a quick little Big Ten whip around here, Kev. What's one team in the Big Ten that you kind of have circled, not as a team that you think may make some noise, but a team that is going to make the biggest jump? Maybe it is a team that was in the cellar last year that could get up into that second level. Maybe it was a second-tier team that's going to try to jump into that, compete with Ohio State tier. What's that team for you as you kind of look out towards this 2025 season?
Yeah, I think you'd be silly to think that a team that will definitely improve, or you'd be silly to think a team that won't definitely improve is Wisconsin.
Yes. I
mean, Luke Fickell is a phenomenal coach up there. It's just a matter of getting his guys in there. And you saw what happened in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
PFP was Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I think that could be a huge, huge jump forward from last year. Could be the Wisconsin Badgers.
Dude, it's a great point, because it was going to be one that I was going to bring up, because it's not only a year where I think they could improve. I think they have to improve because the patience will start running very low. I think for Luke Fickell and at Wisconsin, because we're obviously big Luke Fickell fans, right? Former Buckeye, a guy you want to be successful, somebody you want to turn that program around. And I think, truth be told, I think it's hard to have a really good program today in today's style of football in Wisconsin. It's hard to get kids to go to Madison, right? It's north, man. You go north, and then you go 2 more hours north to get to Madison. It's cold. It's tough to get the best athletes there. I think he's fighting an uphill battle. I think it's imperative, dude, that they have a really good year this year.
Yeah, I mean, unless if I'm recruiting at Wisconsin, I'm inviting kids up for weekends in the spring because it is a blast of a campus to be on when you're not playing football. I mean, it is unreal fun, great people, great atmosphere, all the cheese curds you could want.
The best.
Which is what's shocking, but the reality of the situation is kids from the premier states where the best football is being played don't want to go and play up in Wisconsin, which is what's hard. You need to find some people that are willing to spend some money to bring some people up there to turn the program around.
Yeah.
But that's what they did with Luke Fickell. This is a guy who turned a program around in Cincinnati, and look what happened when he left. I mean, it's kind of crumbled, but that's just what I mean. He's that type of coach. He's that kind of coach, and it'll be interesting to see what Wisconsin can do going forward.
Yeah, you make a great point. We're on the same wavelength there for sure, because whether you believe it or not, I didn't prep Kevin with the questions I was about to ask him, but my first one was going to be, what do you think of Wisconsin and the importance of them having a good year? Another team that I think is really, really interesting is the Indiana Hoosiers, right? They burst onto the scene last year. Kurt Cignetti comes in and ruffles a lot of feathers on his way to the top. And kind of gets he kind of got blessed a little bit when they came to Columbus, and then when they went to South Bend, showed that they can beat up on some of the smaller guys. But when push came to shove and they met that top tier, they weren't quite there yet. But Kev, from your perspective, when you're looking at those guys, do you think they have what it takes to have a repeat season, or do you think it was more of just a flash in the pan and they're going to kind of regress back to the mean of what we're used to seeing at Indiana?
I think Indiana has the talent to do it again. I think the difference is they made a lot of people angry and put a lot of bulletin board material on the board for a lot of teams they're going to play again this year, which was kind of the beauty of them last year. They were not expected to dominate as much as they did, and instead of being humble about it, they went the other way, at least Coach Cignetti did. And I think that made a lot of people – I could tell you a lot of strength coaches were licking their lips hearing Cignetti talk for off-season workouts, so they can just use it to motivate guys for February through April.
No, you make a good point. Something that maybe fans forget about now as we're looking outside, and if you're in Cleveland, if you're in anywhere in Ohio, you're looking at snow. I'm looking at about 6 or 7 inches of snow right now, and you forget about football, right? But he was running his mouth a lot, and coaches don't forget those things. They really don't, especially in the off season when you got nothing and when you got just your guys locked in the room. They're getting all pissed off because they're doing mat drills for feels like the millionth straight day, and they're doing sets to 10 to burn out, and they're getting all angry, and then all coach got to do is put up on the TV. Remember when Coach Cignetti said this? He's going to smoke you like a whatever it was. But they use that stuff. That stuff does not go away. So it'll be fun to see how they respond as they got kind of a target on their back. All right, Kev, last one. We're going to go out west. Take all of our new Western friends, USC, UCLA. We're going to cut Oregon out of this. We're going to add Washington in. I think Oregon's going to be pretty good again this year. But out of USC, UCLA, and Washington, who's going to have the best year out of those guys? UCLA kind of started to trend a little upward towards the end of the season. USC kind of went more on that downward curve at the end of the year, and Washington's still trying to find their way after the departure of Kalen DeBoer a couple years ago. So, who out of those three do you think is going to have the best option or the best year in the Big Ten?
Oh, USC by a mile.
Yeah,
I think they got the talent. I mean, they have the talent. way better. UCLA, I mean, they had a better end of the year. I forget who they played towards the end of last year, but I don't think it was very good competition. I just think USC is going to be the team. I mean, USC beat them last year. Who they played towards the end of the year? USC. They lost to Washington, and they beat up on Fresno State. They beat Iowa and Nebraska. They won more games than I thought.
It kind of got weird there towards the end. I think, if memory serves me correctly. No, memory doesn't. It got weird towards the middle. They ripped off 3 straight wins over Rutgers, Nebraska, and Iowa in October. They fall to Washington, fall to USC 19-13, and then finish up with a nice win. Not really, 20-13 win over Fresno.
I think UCLA is UCLA. I think USC is going to be the one that really kind of steps into their own. They get their first year of NIL under their belt. Excuse me. Thank you. Lincoln Riley as a quarterback there that I think he feels confident in. I think that's the team that's going to kind of turn it around, especially because if I remember correctly, their schedule next year isn't the hardest.
Mm-hmm. It's a good projection by you. I think that, USC is one of those where if they can get hot, they can get really hot. And they just kind of ran out of juice there towards the end. What are you seeing on their schedule there?
Yeah, they got in terms of Big Ten games, they have at Purdue, at Illinois, versus Michigan State, versus Michigan, at Nebraska, versus Northwestern, versus Iowa, versus Oregon, then versus UCLA.
Okay.
Honestly, I think they beat UCLA. I think they beat Iowa. I think they beat Northwestern. I think they beat Nebraska. I think they beat Illinois. I think they beat Michigan State. I think they beat Purdue. I think it's a toss-up for Michigan, and it's probably a loss for Oregon.
Yeah.
But leaving the Big Ten with 2 losses at most. Oh, and then they also played Georgia Southern and Missouri State. So that's why I think the 11-time national champion USC Trojans will be, outside of Oregon, the best West team.
I like it.
The best expansion team.
I like expansion. I like the coming from the expansion draft. Really funny looking at the Big Ten roster, and there's 18 teams on it. Stretching from Eugene, Oregon. Excuse me, I guess Washington's further west and north than that, all the way to New York and Rutgers. It is crazy. It's nuts, but it's the world we live in, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, later on in the off season here, as we get closer to the start of the year, we're going to take a deep dive into each team. We're going to try to get some of our friends on from other shows who cover each of these teams more in depth, to get you on to preview them in a way that gives you an idea of what Ohio State's staring at in their competition in the Big Ten. Something I'm really excited for later on this offseason. But a fun little whip around here, just to pepper some questions around as we sit here looking at the snow. We're getting a sunset, Kev, past 6 p.m. We're starting to get them. We're getting closer to 6:30. Once you see that, once we get a little bit into this like 40s, I start going T-shirts and shorts. Starting to feel like spring's around the corner. We're so close, man. We're getting so close.
Yep, I can't wait.
Can't wait. Yeah, Kevin was cleaning his golf clubs the other night. I know that for a fact because I was doing the same. So, all right, dude, we're getting out of here on that. A lot of fun stuff coming your way here the rest of the week. We're back on Friday afternoon with another episode here. Hopefully recapping a little bit about what happened at those Big Ten SEC Media Day, AD meetings. We talked about that on Monday. Went really in depth about those. So jump back to that show if you are on our YouTube channel. Watching us, we kind of previewed what those meetings are going to be like. They're taking place right now, so we'll hopefully have some recap for you when we get to those. But appreciate you all jumping in. Remember, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow, hit that like button, and keep coming back for more content as we get through the off season and get you set for what should be a fun 2025 season for the Ohio State Buckeyes. For my partner, Kevin Woidke, I'm Anthony Moeglin. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight on the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast.